Your job is to be a leader, and there's been plenty of studies and research, etc., around leadership. And the two things that always come to the top that people want from their leaders are: one, I want to know whatever you tell me is true. I know that you can't tell me everything, but whatever you do tell me has to be true, because trust arrives on foot and leaves in a Ferrari.
Welcome to the Empress Lioness, a sacred space where the spirit rules and the soul remembers everything. In each episode, we sit with visionaries, founders, creators, and healers. I'm your host, Karen Mitchell. Welcome back, my Empresses. Today, we are stepping into a different kind of power. The power of leadership. And when I say leadership, I'm not talking about leadership that isn't just CEOs or executives. Leadership is for the woman who leads her home, her children, her healing, her vision, and her next chapter. And today's guest, Mr. Bill Flynn, has spent decades helping leaders rise, not by pushing harder, but by leading smarter. This episode is not about control. It is about clarity. It is about creating environments internally and externally where excellence can flourish. So straighten your crown, take a deep breath, and prepare for the kind of leadership conversation that awakens both your mind and your mission. Let's rise. Welcome to the podcast, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing great, Karen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for
Or should I call you
accepting.
Empress? I don't want to. I don't want to in any way
Well,
insult you.
you're free to call me whatever you'd like.
Okay.
So I'm going to just dive right in here, Bill, because I got your message, and I started thinking, well, how can I incorporate this so that other women can understand why they need this, why they need you, why we need you to pick your brain. So, Bill, after decades in leadership and advising, what do you believe people still misunderstand about what leadership truly is?
Yeah, so leadership is a word like strategy or awesome. It has
Oh,
lots of interpretations, right?
yeah.
Or interesting. Uh, and so I have a contrarian view of leadership. Um, so, and I've been studying it for 30 years. Leadership uh, is not really a thing. And what I mean by that is we try to say, hey, if you have these things or these attributes or whatever, then that's like leadership. And we're not talking about quality of leadership or good ones or bad ones. I'm just saying leadership in general. The only thing that's the highest level that all leaders have in common is followers. That's it, right? So the thing is, you can be considered a great leader by someone and a horrible leader by someone else, and we're living that today,
Yes.
by the way. But the thing is they're able to create followers in some way, shape, or form. And that has nothing to do with authority, because leadership is not being in charge. Leadership is chosen by the followers. You can't declare yourself a leader, right? You can say I'm in charge and I have authority and whatever. That's certainly a thing, right?
Right.
But leadership is given to you. It is not taken from someone else or imposed on someone else. Um, And the only two things that I've been able to say that all leaders seem to have in common, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, is they have some sort of compelling vision or sort of personality, whatever it is, that attracts people. Um, I think the personality thing fades, right? Because if you don't have a really good vision of sort of where we're going and what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish, then eventually that personality thing starts to fade. Unless you're a cult leader like, David Koresh or
Right.
Jim Jones or whoever. But your job is to say, as a leader, is like, okay, if you're going to follow me, I need to explain to you what it looks like when we get there. So you can also have your own contribution to it, and opinions and thoughts and ways to help us get there faster. Because if I can get, if I'm the one pulling you to the destination and we're doing a good job, that means more and more people are joining us. It gets heavier and heavier to pull. You want to certainly set that up, but then you want them pushing you and helping you get there faster because that adds velocity to the business. So that's one thing. You have to have some sort of compelling um, vision or personality. The second is courage. All leaders seem to have courage, and the courage is to do lots of different things. Mostly, it's to give away authority because you can't do it all yourself. You can't scale a company by yourself. You can scale it to a certain size by yourself, but eventually it's going to outgrow you. You're never going to sleep or have dinner or have friends or
Yes.
family or whatever because it's just going to consume you. But you have to have courage to give it away. You have to have courage to give psychological safety. You have to have courage, to continue on the goal, on the path, because a lot of people are going to tell you it's wrong. You're not going to win, so etc. Um, so those are the only two things that I've really seen that leaders have in common. Now there's humility and charisma, integrity and honesty and all that kind of stuff,
All the other stuff.
right? So yeah, I think if you have those things, and then now we're talking degrees of effectiveness and longevity, but you don't need them to be a leader, right? Steve Jobs was considered a great leader. He had little or no integrity. Right? The guy would just, he bought a car every 6 months so he could keep the handicap thing he could park in the handicap spot. I mean, he was not in any way disabled. Warren Buffett's a great guy, but he has little or no charisma. Bill Gates was a leader, but he was really hard to work for. He was kind of a jerk most of his career, right? And it's been well documented, right? So you don't have to be all those things to be a leader. The best leader I've ever seen in my entire life, and now I'm connected to, which I'm really happy with, is this guy named Alan Mulally. Do you have any idea who Alan Mulally is?
I absolutely do not.
Right. Nobody knows who this guy is. And I think he's the best leader we've had in a century, at least in the United States. And the reason I say that is Alan Mulally was the CEO of Boeing Commercial Aircraft in the middle of 9/11. And they came out of that better than they went in. Then he was the leader of Ford Motor Company in the middle of 2008. And they came out of that better than they went in. I don't know any leader that has had two existential crises thrust at them that for that particular industry and not only survived it, but thrived through it. No leader that I know of has ever done that, and he did it twice.
Twice.
Now, the best part of Alan Mulally, why you don't know him, he is one of the kindest, most thoughtful, and humble human beings on the planet. And you know how I know this is Alan and I are now friends. And I've been talking about Alan for years, and I wrote an article about there's a book called American Icon, which tells the story of Ford and when he came in, and they were going to lose $17 billion that year, and they did. And then he basically made them the number one car company in America within 6 years. And he did that through all sorts of stuff. But he read the article I wrote, a little short article, on my own website, not like on Fortune magazine or
Yeah.
whatever. It was my own website, so it wasn't a very popular. And he read it and he reached out to me in email and said, I want to meet you. I thought you nailed it and I want to get to know you. He reached out to me and now we're connected. We've been friends, friends is loosely
Yeah.
for 5 years.
So, and he
Yeah,
seems like an incredible person too. I
he is
actually
a
wrote his name down so I can Google him
yeah,
later.
he's amazing. Amazing human being.
Okay. So Bill, tell me what is the moment in your career that changed the way you led forever?
So I had a sort of my own existential crisis, if you will. So I did startups here in the Boston area for 25 years. I did 10 of them over that time frame. And startup was either six, I think it was six. I had after five starts, I actually did pretty well. I was 4 for 5, and did pretty well. And my wife at the time and my daughter, who was 11 or something, or 7, she was 7,
Hmm.
said, do you need to do another one? Because they're all consuming, right? I mean, they take up a lot of your time, and even if you're home, you're sort of like thinking through stuff. And I always try to be present, but that was always a challenge. Um, and I said no, so I did a bunch of consulting in that time frame. And someone I used to work with a long time ago knew what I was doing and said, "Hey, I've got this client of mine. He's really struggling. I think he needs someone like you." And I was sort of a sales and marketing guy. And he said, "You got to help him." So I went in. The guy said, he's running an email hosting company. This was before Gmail, before Microsoft 365, Office 365. Um, and I said, yeah, but I just want you to know, I'm sort of taking a hiatus. I only work Monday through Thursday. I start at 10 and I end at 2. I said, can you live with that? Because I get up in the morning, I go work out. I didn't take my daughter to school, and then I'd be done until she got out of school at 3, and I would then go pick her up, and I do that every day for like 9 or 10 months. I did that. But anyway, so this company, I finally joined the business, and he when he brought me on, he said, "Look, I'm tired. I've been doing this for 6 or 7 years, kind of by myself. I just want to sell the thing. Can you make me look as big as possible so I can get as big a price as possible?" I said, "Sure. Let's see what we can do." About a year later, he sold the company. I can't remember. It's an undisclosed number, but it wasn't a huge number. But for him, it was great. It was life changing money for him, right? Millions of dollars. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was asked to run the business after. And so I
Wow.
did. And so that was kind of fun. It was a division of a much larger, about $100 million company. We were probably at $9 million or something. Um, but my first official day as as the general manager of this group, um, we didn't deliver email to anyone, nor did we really do a good job for the next 2.5 days because the entire technical infrastructure collapsed.
Wow.
And so I was now in a situation where I'm like, we got to fix this. Now, luckily, the larger company had been planning to upgrade the infrastructure, et cetera. So they just had to accelerate that. So I had this great partner. They were doing all that and taking care of that. But I had 60 people working for me. I had thousands of customers, and they were pissed, right? 'Cause you get email, you're not happy.
I know.
I said, well, I got to do something. And I've been reading lots of books for many years, and I had two or three really great leaders. So I sort of cobbled together my own little process. And I said, guys, this is what we're going to do. And there was 5 or 6 of us. I said, look, I'm a sales and marketing guy. I don't know anything about technical infrastructures, network. I've never run support before. I certainly don't have a finance background. But here's what I would think it would look like when we're out of this mess. I'd like your thoughts on it. Let's discuss, debate, and decide. Then I need each of you, I'll give sort of the high level view of what needs to happen, but then I need each of you to say, hey, this is where I need to be in order to get us there. This is where I am. And then I need you to sort of draw the map between here and there just to some degree. And then let's work together to make that happen. And it worked great, right? So we basically took us about 10 or 11 months to pull out of it. When I left, after 18 months of running the business, we were on our way to doubling the size of the business from when I took it over. I didn't lose one employee. Our customer service numbers went from, this was, I don't know if you know what NPS is, but Net Promoter Score, it's sort of way of judging how your customers feel about you. That
Okay.
wasn't really a thing yet, but I asked my customers, how are we doing? I think I asked them 5 questions out of 5. And we were 2.9 out of 5 the first time I asked. And then when I left, we were 4.6 out of 5.
That's those are pretty good
Um,
numbers.
yeah, so everything, all the numbers were great, and you can look at my resume, etc. But the best part was when I left to go do the next startup, two of those people that I was talking about in my leadership team came up to me and said, I just want you to know that roadmap, the thing you made me do, I hated it. It was really, really hard, but I'm so glad you made me do it. And I sort of locked that away and said, I want to do that again, right? I want to help people do that.
Roadmap thing.
No, just the fact that they felt, empowered and they felt they had, autonomy and, they had I sort of, if you will, I taught them to fish, right? I
Yes.
didn't tell them what to do. They were the ones who came up with the things to do and we helped each other. I didn't tell them what to do. So I'm like, yeah, I want to be able to do that. And then so I did 4 more startups. They weren't so good. And then I decided I sort of harkened back to that experience and I said, I want to be able to do that again. How would I do that? And that's when I started doing this coaching business around 10 years ago. And I've been doing it ever since. And it's great. I mean, it's a calling. I love it. I wish I had started sooner.
That's awesome, Bill. That's great. So, what part of leadership is internal work, and what part is structure and systems?
Yeah, so it's both. See, the problem, so I'm a neuroscience geek. It's a really good question. And uh, uh, willpower doesn't last very long. If the system that you create doesn't support the change you want to make, especially organizationally, the organizational system will always overcome anything else you want to do. We'll just revert back to what we have. So you have to build both, right? You have to think about, again, do that vision thing, right? One of the things I do with my clients is I give them a book and I say, this is called Vivid Vision, and it's an instruction book, it's a recipe book. I want you to follow it, and I'll give you 6 months to write it. And it's not easy to do. It's like 5 to 7 pages. It's very detailed, again, vivid, right? It's descriptive. And if they don't do it within a year, I fire them. I said because look, your job is to be a leader, and there's been plenty of studies and research, etc., around leadership. And the two things that always come to the top that people want from their leaders are one, I want to know whatever you tell me is true. I know that you can't tell me everything, but whatever you do tell me has to be true because trust arrives on foot and leaves in a Ferrari,
I
right?
get that. I get it.
Exactly, right? And you can get it back, but it will take a lot longer. So don't lose it at all. The other thing is we already talked about is where are we going? Tell me where we're going. I want to know. And by the way, most leaders don't do this. They don't say, here's where we're going. They think that everyone's in their head and they know where we're going. It's like they don't. And by the way, you can't tell them once, you have to tell them like 20 times. And then they'll finally be like, oh, I see. That's exactly where we're going. So you have to understand that's sort of internal work, right? And again, you can be more like Alan Mullally, but you don't have to be, right? People forgave Steve Jobs a lot of his faults because there was something so powerful about the good parts of him that they were willing to forgive him. They were willing to make trade-offs for the bad stuff, right? Now, does that last forever? I don't know, right? Is there turnover or whatever? But that seems to be the pattern. Uh, and we're seeing it in the political arena right now, right? Is that there are tens of millions of people who totally believe in this person, and there are lots of other of us who are like, why? But they totally believe in it, and they like, it's like, and we're never going to convince them otherwise, right? So there's a lot of data and evidence to support that. So you have to work on yourself internally, but you don't have to go too deeply about it, right? I think you should be the best possible person you can. You should have charisma and integrity and honesty and all that kind of stuff. But to be honest with you, you don't have to have it to be considered a great leader, at least by some. Uh, but then if you don't create the systems in place, right? There are three things that drive all businesses in my research, and that is teams. You have to have a team operating system. You have to know how to attract, craft, and develop teams, which is a skill. And we assume, like parenthood, that everyone knows how to do it and can do it well. But as we know, there are some really great parents and not so great parents, right? It's not innate, right? You have to learn how to do this thing. The next thing is you have to have some sort of system in place to run the business, and it mostly revolves around strategy and execution, right? Strategy is how do we win in the marketplace, right? How do we create something that's so unique and wonderful and delights our clients that they keep coming back? They'll pay things, they'll refer people, etc. And then we have to execute that really well, right? You have to be really good at executing things, right? And that's Jim Collins calls that the right people in the right seats doing the right things right. And then the last thing is if you want to grow your business, you have to use cash as your primary financial metric, not revenue, not profit. Cash is the only thing that will not lie to you on your P&L or your balance sheet. And you need it in order to grow. It's fuel for growth, and you need it in front of growth. So you have to create an environment where you can create your own cash. You can certainly go get cash from other people, but now you're giving away some power and some decision making. It's not terrible, but it's certainly something that I don't advocate if you don't have to do it. So if you don't have those three things, and those are the systems you have to have in place
Yeah.
that then support the vision of the company and who you are and your identity and all that kind of stuff. So you need
So
both.
how, or I should say, what would you say to, because I have a lot of young women that are viewers that have these ideas and they don't know how to execute it. Like, I'll tell you, for me, I started my business from the ground up. I was in healthcare and I wanted to get into it to help people. But I noticed that in the industry, there were a lot of people that didn't have integrity with. And people get into businesses for the wrong reasons. And I wanted to come into the business, into the industry, and make a difference in my clients' lives, like genuinely.
Yeah,
But
sure.
as I started going through it, it's just like you said, you can't wear one hat and expect the business to grow. And now the business is growing and leaving you behind. And so now you have to hire other people. But the thing is that once you start that business, you like I sat down and I thought, well, now what do I do? Where do I go? How do I start? And it took me a long time. What do you tell other women that are, or anyone that is thinking about starting a business and want to jump in because we have an idea, we want to execute, but we have no idea how to do that?
Yeah, yeah. So there's like two or three things that just popped out as you said that. So one is you're actually supporting what I just said in the previous thing in healthcare, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is that you have what I would call this, you have a starfish mentality issue in healthcare, right? And I don't know if you know that story about the starfish and throwing them into the sea, etc. Because the system is broken, right?
Very.
Healthcare system, we have the worst healthcare system, except for third world countries. We have the worst healthcare system in the world. It is not designed for health. It is designed for sickness, right? And it creates, because it's basically driven by insurance companies, it's not aligned with the key stakeholders in the business. So the starfish story, for those of you who don't know, it is, there was this young woman, young girl on the beach, and it was a horrible storm, and all these starfish got washed up onto the beach, and she was going down the beach, and she's taking them one at a time and throwing them into the ocean, right? And someone came along and said, looked at her and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm trying to help the starfish." And he said, "Well, you look down the beach, and it's a mile or 2 miles of beach, and it's starfish." And he's like, "You'll never be able to accomplish this. Why are you even bothering?" And she said, "Well, this one, it worked for this one." Right? So that was your model, right? Your starfish, you were trying to, within your world, trying to help them within a broken system. So that's like that, you have to understand that as a business owner. But when people come to me, so I assume you're saying sort of startups, like how do I start up a business? My advice is always the same. I've been asked this so many times, right? Because I did 10 startups, I'm 5 for 10. I was actually 5 for 6. At least in the world I was in, I was relatively well known because I ran sales and marketing for these things. So I was sort of like the tip of the spear. And they would say, "Can you give me some advice?" And I said, my advice is always the same. One is, if you want to do this well, you have to first solve a problem worth solving, that enough people will pay you enough money to make a real business out of it. I don't know how big that business is going to be, but they have to pay you enough money to at least pay your bills and do whatever. Now, if you're lucky and you choose a really large market, then you can make $1 billion business out of it if you'd like. But you don't know that at the beginning, right? Because most people, there's dissatisfaction, right? And it's either dissatisfaction that they have or someone they know or close to them who says, "I could do that better. I could think I can make a difference here, right? I don't like the way this is done. I want to do it differently." And they come up with this idea, and they want to be able to create something. But most business leaders don't do that, right? They just say, "Oh, I want to do this," and they just jump right in. And the problem is most startups fail, and it's mostly because what happens is they have this hypothesis or this idea that they want to do, and they go around trying to prove that they're right, and they do. But your job isn't to prove that you're right. Your job is to try to prove you're wrong. Because if you can't prove you're wrong, you're onto something. But if you try to prove you're right, there's a great song from Simon and Garfunkel which says, we hear what we want to hear and we disregard the rest.
Yes.
Right? So that's what happens. It's called confirmation bias, right? So we ignore all the stuff that goes against our hypothesis, and then we get locked in and we only hear stuff that we want to hear. And that becomes a problem because then you're not sure if you're solving a problem we're solving, but you think you are because it feels right. And you're looking at it through such a small lens that you don't see until later, 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, that you're like, "Oh, this is a mess, and it's taken over my life, and it's super hard to get clients, and everybody wants something else. It's different, etc." You're not getting, where margins are low, all that kind of stuff. So that's one thing I say to them. The second thing I say is, don't run out of money. Those are the only two things you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about culture or all that other stuff because you're
Yeah.
not a real business yet. Until you get through the product market fit not whole, You're not a real business. You are a temporary organization in search of a business model. Until you find your business model, don't act like a business because you don't need to worry about it. You're not a business yet. When you have, then you have to act like a real business. And by the way, you have to go back and revisit all the decisions and whatever you made to make sure they're going to support the future of the business. Because I'm sure, as you did when you first started, you were like a scrapper, right? And you would just take clients on because you need to payroll, you need to pay
Yeah.
your mortgage or
You need
whatever,
to
right?
do your work.
But as you could probably attest to, not all clients are the same,
Oh, no.
right? Some are much more profitable than others. Some are much easier to work with than others. And eventually, you want to get to a place where you can say no to the ones that you recognize as. I tell my clients, you have to have at least a hell yeah and a hell no. Sometimes we
Yeah.
use a different. Sometimes we use a different word,
Yeah.
right? But you until you know those two things, you don't know who to say no to, and you're not sure how to find more of the ones that you really want.
Yeah.
Now, the
I
ones in the
think
middle are the hard part.
I think that's where I'm at right now. And I've been in business for about 5 years, and it has been a struggle, a journey, an adventure. But you're right. I know who to say heck no, I am not taking them, and who to say yes to. I've never advertised. Um, I've always operated on word of mouth, and it seemed to be working really well for me. Um, but it's still a struggle, you know what I mean? It's still a struggle to take myself out of it fully and try to give it to somebody else and say, okay, now it's going to be your baby. I'm stepping away. I'm not going to have my hands in everything like an octopus. That's still a struggle for me. And I know I have to do it in order for the business to continue to grow. But Bill, you often talk about motivation and neuroscience. So, what actually drives people to show up fully? Love?
Yeah, right. Anyone who is at the top of their industry, craft, whatever, they love what they do. And because if you don't love what you do and you sort of like it or whatever, even if you could be great at something and not love it,
Yeah.
right? So I am great at networking. I hate it. I skew to be an introvert. After 2 hours of networking, I'm exhausted. I just want to go home and crawl into bed. Now, I have a really good friend who I love, and he is the opposite. Like at the end of the 2 hours, he is full of energy. He's like, "Where are we going next? Who else can we meet?" I'm like, "I'm going home, Rick. I'm done." Right? So great at it, hate it. So love is the thing that gives you energy. So I always, when people come to me and they say, how do I know what to do and whatever, I say, energy and time are the two things you want to be focused on. When things give you energy, even though you could do it for a long time, you get tired physically. You're mentally engaged and you love it, right? It's filled you up and you want to do it again. You can't wait to do it in the future. And then when you're doing it, time is warped, right? An hour feels like 5 minutes,
Yes.
right? That's what you want to focus on. Those things, whatever they are, you want to pay attention to that. It isn't necessarily a job. It might be part of a job. It could be an aspect or an attribute or whatever. But whatever that is, pay attention to. That'll give you some indication as to what you love, right? I'm not a big fan of passion. Passion is fleeting. Right? You can be passionate, but you're usually passionate for a little while and then it sort of fades, right? If you're passionate and you love, that's great, right? That's like a beautiful combination. Um, so that's what I say that gives you motivation. Most motivation is intrinsic. It is not extrinsic. There's a good balance between the two, but there's a lot of research that says you have to have about 80% intrinsic and 20% extrinsic as a good balance for most things, right? You have to give people purpose. And again, that vision, right, is that motivation to make a difference in the world, to feel like they're contributing and they have autonomy and certainty and etc. That is something that you provide the environment for. You can't give that to them. They get that from themselves.
Yes. Oh, that
You can
sounds
give them skills and knowledge, right? You can teach them that. That's great. Do that. But you can't make someone honest, or you can't make someone, have integrity or whatever. They come with that. Their parents gave them that. Their friends gave them that. You could change it, but it would take so much time and effort to do it. It's not worth it. You'd rather to find them rather than create them.
I agree. I agree with that. What is the biggest mistake that leaders make when they try to fix performance issues, you think?
Yeah, the biggest one. That's a good one. I don't know that there's a biggest one. So there are so many ways to screw up, Karen. There are very few ways that I found to thrive, right? So I'm going to answer this at a higher level and then I'll come down to you. So the data is not good, right? So over 25 years, businesses that start, half of them are dead in five.
Yes, I've heard.
49 point something percent. That's the SBA and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, whatever. Um, After 25 years, only 16% of them are left. So, so we drop quickly and then we slowly keep dropping, right? You'd think after 5, 10, 15 years, you get good at something so that thing would sort of flatten out or whatever, right? It's not. So that's not a good thing. So what's going on there? I don't really know, but the 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 theory I have is there's just so I don't know 7 or 8 years ago I typed into Google and said give me all the reasons why businesses go out of business and I just started writing them down. I got to 35 and I stopped. I'm like there's just so many different ways to go out of business. I said okay, what are the companies that do really well over time? And it's not for decades, it's generations and centuries. And what I found was they do the same few things really well. This is what Alan Mulally did well at Boeing and Ford. There was a pagoda business that I found that was in business for 960 years. Went out of business in 2016 because somewhere along the line the pagoda business dried up. But they made it from 2016. I can't do the math that fast. Down 900 years, right? 900 years. You know, 10 something or 11 something is when they started. There's another business that's still in business for over 1,000 years. It makes mochi, which is, I don't know if you know what mochi is, but it's frozen rice, basically. Uh, and companies like that, like Barry Weinmuller from Bob Chapman, Kip Tyndall of the Container Store, John Mackey when he's running Whole Foods, they do the same few things really right, which I talked about earlier: team, system, and cash, right? And they got really good at that, and they did those few things really well. And they didn't try to do everything for everybody. They focused on what they did really well, and that's what worked. So um, you have to understand that as a business leader, that your job isn't to try to do everything for everybody.
But what does it really mean then, Bill, to grow a business the right way?
The first thing that I ask anyone is why are you doing this? You have to have some sort of purpose. And that purpose can vary tremendously from I want to make a huge difference in the world to I just want to create a place where people enjoy themselves. It almost doesn't matter what we're doing. I just want to create this, again, there's dissatisfaction. They worked at a big company, hated it. They wanted to create an environment where people, loved what they were doing, just loved coming to work every day, no matter what the work was. So you have to give them that, right? You have to create the environment for them to want to be happy and successful and fulfilled. Um, so, what would it mean? So when I want to go to work every day, and not every day, right? Some days are bad, but you want them to be look forward to coming to work every day, to enjoying what they're doing, to enjoy to at least respect, if not enjoy, the people they work with. You have to create that in bubble for them to be able to do that. Then we we're I'm 61 years old. I've spent the majority of my life at work. Yet, if you look at the numbers, most people don't like coming to work. There are only like 25% of people who actually engaged at work, which is horrible.
It
Right?
is.
It might be up to 35% now, but it's pretty bad. Even if 35 is, you want 70, 80%, 90%, you're going to get everybody. And creating those conditions are actually the science is there, right? And so that's what you mean. If you believe the medical data, stress kills lots of people. And
Exactly.
what you're doing is as a leader, you're creating stress inadvertently or not. And so you're actually reducing or taking the lives of your people if you're not creating this environment where they're happy and engaged and fulfilled. So to be honest with you, it is a larger thing. If you can do that, since most people work, and they work most of their lives. It would mean we're healthier, we're happier, we're probably, not in the situation that we're in today where, we're fighting with each other and because it's a scarcity model, right? There'd just sort of be abundance. So I think it's a world changer. That's why I'm doing what I do, right? If you ask me what my core purpose is, my core purpose is called simplified servanthood, right? I think it's a shame that great ideas, great people, and great businesses fail or struggle for completely preventable reasons. We know how to do this. There are plenty of examples. We just don't have the will or the insight or whatever to do it. And so, because it's hard, like it was funny. The reason I met Alan Mullally was I saw him speak. I had known him, and I was invited to this event, and he was speaking, and I'm like, oh my God, Alan Mullally's there. And it was a relatively small event, and I actually asked him later, like, why did you go to this event? And he said, well, it's because his daughter worked for the company, and she said, Dad, would you come and speak at this thing for me? And she said, yeah, of course, because he loves his kids, right?
Yeah.
And I got to ask him a question. And I said, Alan, I've heard your story here. I said, I was just at another conference. I heard the guy who ran Continental and how he turned that around. I've read the story about Steve Jobs came and fixed Apple over number two. And I gave all these things. I said, you guys all do the same exact things. Right? When you tell the stories are the same. I said, so why doesn't everyone do it this way? And he like just paused and he looked at me and he first said, he said, I'm gonna answer that question. And I'm kind of cheeky, right? And I said, and another like 10 seconds went past, and I said, you're gonna answer it today? I don't know. He remembered me later, and he
That's
did.
why.
And his answer was, because it's hard. It's hard living with your convictions and being able to have good people not be part of the organization and stick with the model, etc., because it's hard. Eventually it gets easier, but it's hard to start off. It took him 2 or 3 years to get forward to the place where they eventually ended up, but he had that conviction, right? So I think that's it. We do things that are easy. We go with conventional wisdom, and we create unfortunately, this bad environment. So I think to me, it would be a game-changing thing if I could affect millions of people and leaders and say, look, here's how you do it. Not because Bill said, I said, because here's what the science says, how you create a great company. It's easy to do. It's simple to do. It's not easy, right? But they don't do
So
it.
even when you tell them, they still don't do it.
Yeah, because the day-to-day gets in the way,
That's
right?
true. It does. But I believe that if you really want something, and if people in general, when they really want something and they have an interest in it, they really go after it with everything. They pour everything into it, you know? But what advice would you give to women in leadership who feel overlooked or undervalued or even underestimated?
Yeah. Yeah, so first I'm going to address the thing you just said is so um, even if they're totally motivated, when the pressure is on, especially financial pressure, they default back to the old ways almost all the time. It's really hard to fight that. Um, so I had a leader I worked with for 5 years, and he was exactly that way. He wanted to do it. He was motivated. He read all the books. He knew everything, and he couldn't do it. I don't know if it was his ADHD or some sort of thing in his world, whatever. He could not do it. He wanted to, but he couldn't. Anyway, so first thing I would say to women leaders is, and it's not women leaders per se. It is you need a balance between male and female, right? But if you skew towards male, you're going to screw it up, most likely. You're going to piss people off. You're going to run them over. You're going to create an unsafe environment. We've seen it over and over and over again. Right? Because it's about power and it's about status and it's about knowing everything and being the decision maker. And I solve problems. And it's funny because I work with my leaders, and when I do an intake thing, and I've done this probably 150 times. And I ask them what sort of the thing I ask, what do you love? What drives you, etc. I would say 60 to 70% of them say, I love to solve problems. And I store that away. In my first meeting with them, I say, we did this survey, and it's it's a high level thing. And I said, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to disappoint you. I said, most of you said you love to solve problems. And I'm going to tell you, that's not your job. And they're like, look at me like, what are you doing? I said, your job is to avoid problems, not solve them. Now, you may have to solve them once in a while, but if you just solve them and go away, you didn't do your job. Your job is to say, what might have caused that problem to happen? And then solve that one. And then you say, well, what might have caused that? And until you get to the root, once you solve the root, all the other problems go away,
That is true.
right? But they don't do that. And by the way, we men don't like that. We like being the hero. We like, jumping in and taking charge and doing all this kind of stuff. It's sort of like innate, right? It's sort of caveman kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes it's important, like the house is on fire, you got to jump in and do stuff. Totally get it. But you need to move from what I call sort of hero or controller to architect, right? Your job needs to go from hero, I solve problems, I'm here, tell me what to do and tell me what's going on and I'll give you an answer. To me, more female oriented things, which is more about relationship and empathy and compassion, right? You need both. You need more of that. And we talked about it before we came on the air. And the example I always give is in COVID, right? So in COVID, there were two big metrics that everyone looked at, which were infection rate and death rate, right? Now, when you looked at the countries that had the lowest infection and death rates, out of the top 10 of them, eight of them were run by women, right? And the
Yep.
poster child was Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, right? She treated it like a mother would, right? She didn't like just say, "Here's the answers" or whatever. She talked to lots of people and say, what's going on. She gathered information. She gave clarity to people and said, "Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's why it's good for you. Here's how we're going to help each other." Right? And people, they sort of say, what's a good leader? And to me, if you're a mother who has multiple children, you are already well trained to be a leader. Why? Because you have to take these three or four different people,
Right.
create this environment that they all are happy and that it's a good environment to be in. Um, and and you also have this other person as partner. If it's a male, then you got to deal with that person, which is probably the fifth child, right? And that is a skill that you develop. If you're really good at it, you can run anything,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what you're doing. You're creating an environment that people can thrive in, knowing that everyone is different,
Yes.
right? And giving them the opportunity to be the best versions of themselves as often as possible is basically what a mother does, right? And so that's why I say if you want to build a long enduring company, you have to have many more female qualities than male. And most women, girls and women, sort of grow up that way, right? Or it's part of who they are, genetically. Not everyone is, and there's lots of examples, etc. I'm not saying it's the same, but if you look at great leaders, Muhammad had a lot of female qualities. He was one of the most compassionate people you ever meet. He had one guy who just said, "Look, I'm not doing what we're going to do," and he said, "That's okay." He put his arm around him and said, "That's okay. Let's find you a place where you can do what you want to do." And he helped him find a job somewhere else. He could have just said, "You're fired and get out of here."
Right.
No, he said, "Look, this is about I'm taking care of everyone. Whether you want to be this or not, I feel a responsibility to help you as much as I possibly can." And women are much more like they're about relationships, they're about social things, and we men just aren't as tied to that, right? It's not something we think of. But when you do that, everyone else sees how you treat everyone else. And when you treat the individual poorly, you create an environment where everyone's scared,
Yeah.
and fear for their job. And so they act differently. And Simon Sinek says your second job at work is lying, hiding, and faking. So you don't get called out. And women leaders are less likely to create that environment. And
Oh,
the
well,
data supports it.
and we do have our challenges, but you're the first person that ever broke it down that way because I think that I'm a great leader. I didn't set out to be that person, but because I had compassion and empathy for individuals, I care for my clients and the staff, and I make that known. But you also there's like a thin line between being familiar or too friendly and too nice and too nurturing
Yeah.
and being firm. I think
Yeah.
that's where the lion and the lioness kind of intertwines, and you got to have a good balance to have a
Agreed.
successful business.
Yeah, too many leaders, whether it be women or men, don't know the difference between being nice and being kind. They're two different things. And great leaders are kind. They're not nice. Now they might be nice, but that they don't lead being nice, right? And the example I always give is nice is, so let's say we're having dinner together and you have spinach in your teeth. Being nice to you would be not mentioning it, but being kind to you would be, hey, Karen, just I don't know if you know this, but you kind of got some spinach in your teeth there. That's being kind, right? Now, if we're in a group of people, I'm not going to call you out and say you look like an idiot. You got this spinach in your teeth. That's not being kind. Kind is sort of leaning over and saying, hey, I don't know if you noticed. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's a one-on-one thing, right? That's being kind to someone. Alan Mulally was kind to that gentleman who said, I'm not doing what you asked. And Alan was kind. He said, that's okay. You don't have to do it. I'm not asking you to do it. But you're not going to do it here, right? And let's find you another. It's like I'm well connected. Find you a place that values what you value. We value this. That's being kind. And I think too many women worry about being nice, and being thought of as being nice, and that's not your job. Your job is to, when you're nice to one person, you might actually be inadvertently hurting seven people, right? By keeping them in their job and letting them get away with stuff and saying, oh, that's just sort of Karen being Karen, whatever. That's not, you have to think about that. I always say it all the time is that you have to understand if you do this, what happens? What are the ripples of making this decision with this person, keeping them in this job that they're not good at, or that people don't work with them well. Um, and that's where I think women, unfortunately, um, fail when
Kind
they're
of
going to
fail.
fail. They fail that way.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I've learned recently um, is that women explain things in a more concrete way, and they like concreteness. And when people perceive that differently than more sort of abstract and open, which I thought was interesting, because you want clarity, but you don't want to like over explain stuff. You want to sort of give people room to. It's almost like art, right? You want to sort of or create a song that people can interpret their own way. Where I guess women tend to like say, no, this is what the song means and whatever, uh, and that sometimes inadvertently takes away power from someone else or autonomy. I don't know how true that is, but I thought it was interesting information.
Yeah,
Um,
that is interesting.
yeah, but what I found with most women is they just don't have confidence, because we live in a world where the male dominated way of doing things is the accepted way. Unfortunately, it's not the right way, right? And the data supports it, right? Half of them go out of business, and most men run businesses, or most men are in charge.
Yeah.
Yet most businesses fail. Most people are disengaged. Like, well, why would we do it? Why wouldn't we say that isn't working? Maybe there's another way. And then we look at all these great run businesses, and they're run by people who are compassionate and thoughtful, and they're more about relationships than achievement. And they're willing to be patient to let people grow than trying to get to the answer quickly, because they know eventually those people will be able to do things on their own, and they won't need me to do their job, because my job isn't to help them do their job. My job is to help the future of their job be better. You can't do
That's a
both.
good way of putting it. Yeah. Do you think this country would be ran better by a woman president versus a man?
So again, a president who has more female qualities, yes, absolutely, right? Because especially, we think the president has a lot of power, and the guy right now thinks he has a lot of power, and he's finding out that no, he really doesn't have all that much power, right? He's creating fear, etc., which is creating a dynamic. But eventually, you know, the founders of our country created an environment where people like him and the minority cannot overtake the majority, right? Um, yes, I think that we have seen leaders that have more of those qualities, and to be honest with you, history shows that democratic leaders, if you look at how the country is doing under them, that we grow faster, we're richer, we're seen better under those people than Republicans. Which again, I'm an independent, so I don't really go either way. But if you look at, but I'm a scientist. So I'm like, let's look at the data. And if you look over the last 80 years, the country has always done better except for a couple of exceptions, under democratic leaders who generally are seen as more, thinking about others and caring for everyone, big tent and all that kind of stuff. Um, but it also goes to companies, companies that are run by women, female sort of focused attributes are better run companies over the long term. I'll tell you, in the short term, if you want to like flip a company really fast, put a guy in charge,
Right. Yeah.
right? Because you want things, you want decisions done quickly, etc. You want to just get going. You want to flip the thing in 3 to 5 years. Absolutely, men are much better at that because that's sort of our innate nature. Again, I'm generalizing, and not everyone's the same, and all that kind of stuff.
True.
Yeah.
So, what is the legacy you want your work to leave in the world?
So my BHAG, or if you want to call it, big hairy audacious goal, is I call it bend the curve. So that curve that I told you about, right, that goes down and then across from from 100 companies, and then 50 of them are gone in 5 years, and then only 16 left at the end. I want to bend that curve. I want to make that curve more shallow as much as I possibly can. So I'm writing books about it. I'm doing more speaking. And I'm trying to create this understanding with people and leaders that there's a better way to do it. It's actually easier in the long run, but harder in the short run. And if you can create the environment for this, and I give them very simple ways to do that, through my books. And you're the right kind of leader, right? This sort of more architect kind of thinking leader, right? So my next book coming out is called The Hero to Architect, or I don't know what it's gonna be called eventually. The publisher decides that typically. But it says you need to go from controller to builder to architect. So controller is I solve, I decide, to builder, which is I teach people how I solve and how I decide, to I create systems that don't need me to do any of that. Now, so I'm doing an assessment right now, pushing the book, and only 20 people or so have done it. But I'll tell you, 90% of the people consider themselves builders. The other 10% consider themselves architects. So that's two. No one considers themselves a controller, which the data shows that most leaders are controllers. So either it's a small database, right? So I don't know.
Right.
I could be skewing towards that, but if I do this for 100, 1,000 people, we should be moving in the other direction. But this shows you that most people don't have a good self-perception. They think they're builders, but they're really not, right? So what I should do is then do another one and say, "Hey, your leader said this. Could you tell us what you think they are?" And my
That's a
guess
good
is
one.
right. They're going to say, well, they probably won't let me do it, but that would be interesting, right? No, they're not a builder at all. They haven't taught me anything. They tell me what to do. They tell me in the morning what to do, and then in the afternoon what to do, and they check on me and they give me metrics. And
Yeah.
most people are controllers. But by the way, because that's how we're rewarded through our lives, right? We're rewarded for having the answer and deciding, and especially in business, right? It's the heroes that get promoted. But then all of those things that made you get to that point now work against you if you want to lead teams, because it can't be about you anymore. It can't be about you deciding. It's about you creating an environment where you're not necessary to decide. If you make 100 decisions in a week, only two or three of them were probably the ones you had to make. So let's figure out how to get the other 97 off your plate and let other people make it. Right. So you have to go through the control. You have to become a builder. You have to teach them all that kind of stuff. But eventually you have to move to this systematic model, um, so you have more time to predict the future of the business and create it versus actually running the company day to day.
Like you came with a lot of information, Bill. I
Yeah,
gotta give
sorry.
that to you. No, 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 it's fine. It's good because people ask these questions every day, and now they have a foundation that they can start to build that company off. So tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you, Bill.
Sure. My website is the best way to do it. It's catalystgrowthadvisors.com. I have a book. This is my first book, which is not a thought leadership book. It's just sort of my take on stuff, but a lot of what I just said is in there. You can get there. I actually give it away for free if you just want to download it as a PDF. I don't charge you for it, but you can go to Amazon, Audible if you want and buy it. I get like $4, which is great. All my contact info is on there. All of my services are on there. Everything. I write an article twice a month. I'm very proud. I have a 56% open rate on my articles, and they're very short, so they seem to be resonating with people. So hopefully they don't waste your time. Uh, that's it. CatalystGrowthAdvisors.com.
Yeah, there are a lot of people, not just women, but wanting to open up a business. And I try to encourage a lot of people to do it. They operate doing it now, but it's so healthy to get this information so that they know how to start the process, get it
Yeah.
moving.
I'll tell them if they don't know if they're not confident, then tell them to call me and I will tell them why they should be more confident. I've seen it.
Bill, thank you so much. You brought so much wisdom and your heart to this conversation. You reminded us that leadership is not about hierarchy, it's about humanity. It's about clarity, compassion, and the courage to rise. So, to every Empress listening today, you are a leader, a born leader. According to Bill, all of us are. Your voice shapes worlds. Your decisions, it shifts generations. And your leadership begins with the woman you choose to be today. So lead wisely, lead boldly, and remember, the lioness has always been within you. So you need to sit on your throne. What are you waiting for? Thank you again, Bill. I'm your host, Karen Mitchell.